It's Happy Times and Places. I'm Toby Hadoke, and I'm under orders to select my favourite things about a Doctor Who story chosen by a friend, and to see if they match with their favourite things, and if they don't, I get dragged off by a scary claw.
Hello Toby, and anyone who's watching or listening to this. My name's Michael Dennis. I'm a writer and stage manager. Thank you for inviting me in. The story I've chosen for you to watch is the Macra Terror.
Well, welcome everybody. It's episode 3 of the Macra Terror, and that's Michael Dennis you've just heard, who is the friend I have asked to contribute to this episode of this sequence of episodes of Happy Times and Places. I've never met Michael. In fact, I'm reminded because Michael, has written some impressive stuff. Dark Sublime was a play that was on at the West End. I used to see his name on posters on the escalators, and Marina Sirtis was in the play. And I'm thinking, see, this is where proper TV sci-fi royalty and a playwright who's a fan of this stuff gets to do stuff at the West End and thinking, I wish I was part of that gang, and he wrote one of the brilliant sets of queers that Mark Gatiss did for BBC Four. Wonderful work. And so when somebody like Michael lets on that they have an inkling of who the F I am, I find it terribly flattering. So it's lovely that Michael has contributed to this, and of course he's going to give his insight as a playwright to this, which means it's probably going to be slightly more highfalutin than whatever I trot out by going, that control panel was in Frontier in Space. Before you write in, there's not a control panel from Frontier in Space in this story. I was just doing that as an amusement. So look, I've had to get up and change the disc to get to episode 3. That's convenient layout. But I am now on the episode reconstructions menu, which I'm pleased to note has a space after an equal amount of spaces around the dashes between the number and the letter play. So all is right with the world temporarily. So listen. Toby, we sometimes might ask for proof that you have a Nerky spectrum-y sort of mind. Yes, well, I can't. I can't think what sort of thing you'd cite. So listen. Episode 3 of the Macra Terror, chosen by the estimable Michael Dennis, and I'm going to press enter. I'm going to play without narration. In 3, 2, 1. And here we go. So we are on to episode 3 of the Macra Terror, which I think is proving to be. And I remember when I did this for Running Through Corridors, the book I did with Rob Shearman, where we watched the entire series in order. A hugely underrated story. I'm sure it was a 10 out of 10 for me when I did Running Through Corridors. It's slightly harder to assess it when I'm sort of talking at the same time, but I've found it's raced by. I think it's very gripping. I think it has subtext, which is marvelous, but I think it has that great Doctor Who thing of scares, and I like the fact clearly at the end of episode 2, the claw grabbing the controller was on the screen. And at the beginning of episode 3, it was, we actually saw it full screen, or vice versa, or a mixture of the two. But we have 2 separate, slightly different versions of the claw grabbing the neck, which I presume is one is from one episode and one is from the other. But that means we get that moment rescued from the Australian furnace twice. And I mentioned that I would explain Macra Beast, which is definitely a part of my lexicon, because when I went into town, I was living with my friend Mark, slightly lost between university and embarking on any sort of proper career. I was doing stand-up a bit, but was I working at a restaurant by that time? But I was a bit in limbo. and I went and got the Ice Warriors collection to get a lovely, decent quality copy of the Ice Warriors, which hadn't been kicking around. I had a grotty boot. Oh, there's cine clips here as well. Oh, I'd forgotten about that. That's a nice, lovely shot of Troughton guffawing. Yeah, so we get cine clips from Australia. I think they're from Australia as well. But the person who took the cine clips tended to be mostly interested in shots of the regulars, which is lovely. So it means we get some nice shots of the Doctor and stuff, but it means we don't get shots of things that we might not have photographic evidence of elsewhere. And his, as Sandra Bryant is credited in episode 1, we'll talk about Cheeky in episode 4, from The War Machines, playing Kitty. I forgot her name in episode 1. So Officia here is played by John Harvey, who is Professor Brett in The War Machines. Poor old me, Doc. Good old Terence Lodge, good actor. So yes, so I got that cassette of Doctor Who, the Ice Warriors, which also had a Missing Years documentary, in order to showcase those clips that had been rescued from the Australian censors. And there's a wonderful interview with the discoverer of them, Damien Shanahan, who since then I've had the pleasure of meeting on several occasions, and he's a charming and enthusiastic fellow who's very good company. And there's a lovely photo of him looking very stylish and Australian on the beach, and he says that, you know, and when he introduces the bit about the Macra clips, he says, you know, and these are good because you get to see the full Macra beast, and I always think of the Macra as a beast from now on, never having thought of it as a beast before, but it is a beast. So I hope you now go around saying the full Macra beast. So thanks to Damien Shanahan for being intelligent and archaeological enough to go and prize these clips from the hands of the Australian censors for us all to enjoy. So there's another cine clip. Look at that, and it's of Troughton as well. And it's they're longer than you remember. Oh, so isn't it funny? We've got clips from 2 different sources of episode 3 of the Macra Terror. I like the sort of childlike way it's slightly patronising, but when Troughton does it, it's not patronising. You imagine he's one of those people that would speak to a child in a way that made the child feel like they were totally being spoke to on a kindly and on a level, but to adults it would sound like they were talking down to them because it is a slightly unnatural way of speaking, but it's so beautiful the way that he does it. His vocal mannerisms are so lovely, and so gentle and benign, even though he can be dark and spooky. He has that lovely sort of innocent guilelessness, but even when he's doing that, look at that face in another cine clip. Look at that kind of, you know, the sort of a bit like the story. The surface of Patrick Troughton is jolly and clown-like and you know, playful. All of the things that the colony is, but there's also a darkness. There's a calculating intelligence going on underneath, and perhaps even a malignancy. I don't buy him as the Dark Doctor. As many say, oh, by the way, it really got on my tits. I followed one of those Facebook things saying, we've listed and somebody's written this, we've listed the best Doctors from worst to best, and you go, okay, well, and they put Troughton at the bottom, and their lame argument was, well, we don't have many of his episodes. Well, one, that's not a reason to put somebody at the bottom, and there are enough to form an opinion, and if and they're available as well. But I mean, any idea that Troughton should be anywhere near the bottom, just on acting ability alone, is ludicrous, and annoys me. But it was such a mealy-mouthed reason as well. It was basically saying we probably haven't got any to hand, so we haven't been able to check. You don't even guess Troughton at the bottom. Sorry. And if Troughton is your least favourite Doctor, there's nothing for you in this podcast. I'm so sorry. But I haven't even spoken about the thing that John Davis, that I said, he said that he thought there were more than one Macra Beast model. In that Shawcraft short film, I did think when I first saw it, oh God, there are more than one, because there was a sort of white one, but somebody explained to me, no, the white is it at one stage in the build, and then there's another the next time you see it, although it's actually, the film could have all been taken on one day, but apparently it hasn't been. It's that it's the same bits, but with a paint job and more work done. So what I'd mistaken for lots of Macra models was the same one at different stages. I love the fact that Troughton does his maths on chalk, scribbling on the walls. I used to scribble on my bedroom walls because I'd seen people do it, I think, and I'd seen people draw on their bedroom walls and be artistic, and so I tried to do it. God, I've just rewatched V. I drew a V soldier, and I'd imagined what it would be like, because real artists can draw on bedroom walls, and it looks really good. And mine was just a crap pencil drawing, no shadow, no shading, no shadow. It's really sad. And he chalks himself up a score of 10 out of 10. I love that. I love the business with the chalk that he does, and that sort of scampy, anarchisty stuff. I like that. That's a secret known only to 3 people. We don't know who those 3 people are, but it's just slightly more believable than saying only I know that, or whatever. It just widens it out a little bit. That little word I like to use, not a little word, verisimilitude. So. Yes, the other thing with John Davis was that when I interviewed him, I had a coup d'interview in that Troughton changes his mark on the chalk. Superb. To 11 out of 10. I love that. Is that Graham Lehman, who plays the controller, and I know I mentioned this in The Seeds of Death, but I can't guarantee that everybody listens to these, and I've got 25 minutes to fill. Graham Lehman, this is his first Doctor Who. What does the controller not do? He does not stand up. He is a seated character. He then comes back in Fury from the Deep and plays Price, who is another character that we cannot see. And in the footage we do have of him, I think Troughton slightly moves him from his chair, but he's there in it, paralysed with fear. But Price is the guy who's at the desk, talking to the rigs. And then he comes back in The Seeds of Death as the Grand Marshal, who you only see, sedentary, or just a close-up of his head, so he's probably seated in his space chair. And then he's a Time Lord in episode 1 of Colony in Space. Seated. And then he's a Time Lord again in The Three Doctors, the one who's at the screen, talking to the President and the Chancellor, seated, and he's in Doomwatch, and he's on crutches. Now there are a couple of things. He's in a production I saw of John's. Was it Nana maybe, where he does have a few moments where he's on his feet, clearly without support, but he was a disabled actor. And he was either on crutches or a wheelchair user. So I did this for John. I said, of course, you cast Graham Lehman. He said, I cast him a few times. I said, yes, because of course he was disabled, wasn't he? And John had no memory of that whatsoever. So it was a great bit that I actually chopped out of the Who's Round because it was a moment I thought was going to be a great talking point, and in fact John hadn't remembered it at all, and I began to doubt myself and go, well, am I wrong about this? But Margot Hayhoe, who worked with Graham a few times, said no, he definitely had mobility issues. And then when I was doing my play about Spike Milligan, and subsumed myself in Spike stuff. Graham Lehman and Spike Milligan served in the same unit, I think, and at reunion, Spike used to go and pick Graham up because Graham was not mobile enough to transport himself. And I've since met Graham's son, and apparently towards the end of his life, he got multiple sclerosis or some sort of condition that decreased his mobility as time went on. And he actually played a corpse on stage in a play rather than give up, being involved in theatre and acting, full stop. So, a laudable exercise in casting a disabled performer, which in those days I think you'd probably make more of, whereas in these days, you'd make more of, whereas in those days they sort of hide it, which is interesting. These cine clips have been gloriously restored. I don't know who did that. I assume Peter Crocker. Well done, Peter, because I've only ever seen them very sort of dark and flickery and sort of all folded in on themselves. And yes, John Harvey, I think, is fairly terrible in the War Machines, with his lisping about in his bow tie, talking in that slightly sci-fi manner. But he's really good in this as Officia, who was credited on sort of episode guides and things as Official, small o, and which is not as good a part. You'd never want to play a part that's a job description, says the guy who played Cyril in An Adventure in Space and Time, rather than Barman. And that was entirely down to Mark Gatiss going, Barman won't look so good on the credits, will it? Give yourself a name. So Cyril is named after Cyril Shaps. But that meant for ages that people thought I was the caveman guy, which is Roger May, not Tony Robinson, IMDb. So poor old John Harvey, if he'd have cared about such a thing, which he wouldn't have done, flicking through Doctor Who magazine, would have gone, no, I wasn't official. Official sounds like just a guy at a desk doing a bit of a job for a couple of lines. I was Officia, a character, and quite a good character who does quite a lot. But it's like calling somebody minister or town clerk. It's actually a job title with just a letter missing at the end. Traffic warder. So I'd have asked for a name change. But he looks slightly different. I like the glasses on John Harvey. And I like the way that Patrick Troughton sort of runs rings around him a bit here. And of course, yes, now we're in the mines, the dark underbelly of the colony. Because Ben let him go, and of course that's the ultimate Doctor Who thing, isn't it? Is that a chink of humanity survives, and humanity is indomitable in the face of mind control and aliens and dark underbellies of everything, including us. The essence of decency and goodness lingers, and the Doctor's going to help to prise that out of Ben, because that's what the Doctor does. But it's a hopeful message, isn't it? Of course, it's useful to the plot having Ben lapse whenever we need him to. And Medoc's dead. Medoc survives in the book. He just suddenly comes back in the final paragraph. But presumably Medoc dies because he's not much use to the story anymore. But he's been a good character, and Terence Lodge is a great servant to Doctor Who. Bless him, Terry Lodge. He was Elizabeth Sladen's landlord for a while, and he was great mates with Brian Miller. In fact, he's got he's in a home now, Terry. But he when he wasn't, when I visited him at his home, he'd got a picture of himself and Brian Miller on stage on his desk. He was mates with Albert Finney as well, Terence. And he was good mates with Bernard Hepton. In fact, he was great mates with Bernard Hepton, Terence Lodge, and they kept in touch. Bernard Hepton, the fine actor from Secret Army and Colditz, and not Doctor Who, although he was considered for the role of Dyson in The 10th Planet. Hepton was a great actor and a great theatre director as well. A lot of people speak very highly of his theatre directing. But yeah, they were all great mates. So yes, the dark underbelly and the gas, and the gas that feeds the Macra. And Ian Stewart Black was an interesting writer to have working on Doctor Who as well, wasn't he? Oh yes, and this is Sunar, isn't it? Jane Enshaw, who I think is in America. I know I've come across a lot of the sort of dancing ladies. I can see that the foul-minded of you will now be making their own joke. Well done, good, consider it done. A lot of the dancing extras in this are people that I've hung about. I've bumped into. Oh yes, I did a Doctor Who once. One of them drinks at the Club for Acts and Actors, where I'm a member. And but also one of the extras. This is actually Maureen Morris, the Queen Spider, who's the wife of George Galaccio. The voice of the Great One, Maureen Morris, is an extra in this. I like the way they have the eyes glow there in the darkness on the telesnap reconstruction. That was very, because I do think the Macra eye lights are a little bit phony because they're clearly lights on the end of stalks. But I suppose as they emerge out of the gloom, that would be quite spooky. And that looks really great in that picture. And of course, loads of dry ice and loads of smoke will really help. But yeah, this is the sort of cobwebby mines underneath. And look, Jamie's all dirty and grimy. It's a further extension of this metaphor about, the happy and gay colony, which we haven't really had much of this episode. Of course, we had that great start with all the dancing, the drum majorettes, and all of that, and then in the last episode we have the cheerleaders and the practice and all of that, just to remind us what this is. But that really starkly over cheery opening that we had is gradually sort of being peeled away, and you're seeing the mechanics underneath it, as of course anything that has a facade of jollity or colour has got to have dirty gears grinding it underneath just to keep it moving. And look at that face of his as I love watching Troughton as he works something out, and he's got this brilliant expressive eyebrows. They're doing the poison gases to feed the Macra, and this is really the stuff of that I think what one was expecting of the stories of monsters lurking in the darkness. But it's interesting how they don't really rely on the Macra for a lot of the story, because that's not really what it's about. The Macra represent something, they represent the dark underbelly of a supposed utopia. There's something trapped down there they wish to keep alive, and having something underneath, isn't it? I mean, it's as stark as it gets. It's not a metaphor even. It's pretty on the nose. And there's two Macra, which I'm assuming were done with clever shooting, maybe mirrors. I don't know, but I know that John Davis was visually ambitious, and certainly later on was a technically very skilled director. Graham Lehman gets a credit in every episode, although he's only on screen for that sort of cliffhanger moment where he gets hoiked off. So that's quite nice for him. I'm thinking at top speed, says the Doctor. Oh, I've got to think of something that I like about this. And this is good because they're cut off from Jamie. They know that he's down there. They know that he's down there trapped with something really nasty. It's killed Medoc. I wonder if you do hear Medoc sort of go, "Ah!" don't you? So I don't know. Again, would that be a claw just coming in and grabbing him? It's a shame they didn't cut that for Australia. It's a nice bit of shooting as well. It's a nice set with see-through things that you can shoot the Doctor and Polly through. Oh, yeah. Because I think this is going to be one of those episode endings that... Because I'm sure on the soundtrack... Yeah, when I say the soundtrack, it was a bootleg taped off air at the time. And I'm sure the episode endings were artificially bunged into them because they'd initially been cut together without episode endings. And I think that's when the cliffhanger came in, when he said full pressure now or full pressure action. He said then, and maybe it was that moment, but because it's difficult to tell when the cliffhanger is with just the music, because obviously it's a very visual cliffhanger, and it's Jamie trapped with two Macra on either side, which I'm deciding was absolutely blooming terrifying. But it's really difficult to discern from this, despite the best efforts of this. Of this reconstruction. You know, this is where we could really do with some visuals, but it's that musical sting, isn't it? It suggests Macra. And I love the way that they've illuminated the eyes with the lights. That looks absolutely brilliant. So sorry, I sort of ran out of things to say there. It's partially because I was trying to discern what was going on. It really is it is Sunar Jane Enshaw. I'm sure she's in America. Dennis Gocher, Richard Beale, Robert Jewell. So Kenneth Sharp was an excellent designer. His sets for the Claws of Axos are superb. We never managed to get hold of him either. I think we must have to assume that he's no longer with us. The Frame interviewed him, of course. He did speak on record and gave them some nice pictures. So listen, what do I like best about the Macra Terror Part 3? Well, I like the business. I'm going to sort of open this out. I like the business with the Doctor writing his sums and doing all that stuff, and he's on the chalk. But he's largely he's not on the run much in this story. I know he does that at the end of episode 1 with Medoc, but otherwise he's sort of having to mind his P's and Q's and hang around with Peter Jeffrey and with John Harvey, sort of undermining them in quite an underhand manner. And he's very anarchistic in this from the getting himself messed up to the sort of the way he sort of goads the authority figures with this sort of childlike innocence, where he's really sort of laying it on to them a little bit. So I think, but partially because it's embodied by the sequence with the maths that he does, where he goes, aren't I clever? That mock surprise. It's the Troughton Doctor's way of that he really is an anarchist in this, and he's got those lines about do this, don't do this, do that, don't do anything of the sort. And he's written as a bit of an agitator, and somebody who looks like he's playing the system and looks like he's obeying and is a perfectly good guy. And underneath, I think he's more of a mischief maker in this than he is in perhaps some of his later stories, because he really is an agent provocateur. So it's how the Troughton Doctor is portrayed like that, because I sometimes, as I say, don't quite buy the Dark Doctor thing with Patrick Troughton, but I really do in this. I think he's like an onion in this, and that's appropriate for a story with a society that has different layers that need peeling away. It's all about peeling away of layers, which makes for very good drama, and it means that the actors can play things at different levels as well. So it's the Patrick Troughton's, it's the second Doctor as anarchist, manipulative anarchist, that I'm going to choose for episode 3. What has Michael chosen? Oh, he's got his fist to his mouth as though he's not quite sure in the video. Let's see what he's going to say.
I'm going to be concise with this one. It's the Doctor working out the formula, awarding himself 10 out of 10, receiving confirmation his answer is correct, and upping his score by 1 more point.
Yes.
It's a wonderful moment that makes me laugh out loud simply by listening to it and looking at a single telesnap. This allows me a tiny digression, which is to say that I always watch the reconstructions. I'm not fond of the animations, fine though they undoubtedly are. I want to try and see the episodes as they would have been. And the reward for doing that, for following a series of telesnaps that change every 40 seconds or so, are those glorious moments that you forget are coming when a sensor clip is dropped in and the whole thing comes to life for literally often a second. It's magic. I wonder, is there any comparable experience for any other group of people to this willing together of disparate shards and fragments of text across different media? Anyway, that's by the by. 11 out of 10. It's a lovely character moment because the Doctor is, all the Doctors are, funny and proud and petulant and brave and shallow and clever and selfish and flawed, and it's his flaws that make us take him, her, to our heart. But it's a specifically second Doctorish moment too. Troughton has such delight in it, you really feel the joy of that extra mark.
And because I was talking about the Machiavellian and Doctor, but I also, I used as the springboard for that the chalk sequence. So I'm going to revel in the joy of that extra mark because I'm going to give myself that mark. I think there was enough in that, seeing as this is a pretty needle in a haystack kind of exercise. I think there was enough crossover there that I'm going to take a point from Michael for that. Now, if you're keeping score at home, you don't have to grant me that. That's absolutely fine. If you are keeping score at home, by the way, please read The Mill on the Floss. Well, I've never read it. You might have done. If you've read Mill on the Floss, learn to make pasta. Do something other than keep my tally going here. And I love shards of fragments of disparate media to make up there. I liked Michael's summation of that. Yes, and indeed, who else but Doctor Who fans would, if you spoke to a normal person about, what stories you like? Oh, I like that one. Oh, can I watch it? Well, you can't really because it doesn't exist. Well, how do you know you like it? Well, because obviously I know it really well. Yeah, and they've got the soundtrack and some pictures and some clips and somebody's put the. And now, it used to be that Doctor Who fans would build these things. I in fact remember suggesting it to somebody once, saying, well, what you could do is you could build build it with existing clips and photos and this fan. There's like 4 photos, it just wouldn't work, and go, yeah, no, you're right, he was older than me and I felt young and stupid. And of course then the telesnaps turned up, and now that's what people do. But not only fans do it, it's available on a commercial release with and without narration, and also in animated form. That is unprecedented and unique to Doctor Who fans and bonkers, and aren't we lucky that it means that in terms of they are, and I do watch the animations, but for a different experience, and I think they're great. So I'm not quite with Michael on that, but I understand. But he wasn't being mean, was he? But it means that in animated form and in the occasional moving picture from 2 different sources, the Australian censors and the individual who took the cine camera bits off screen, and of course thanks to John Cura taking the telesnaps, it means that actually for split seconds, for milliseconds, and in slightly different formats, there are, in the blink of an eye, such things as Macra. And hopefully there will be an episode 4 as well. Until then, thanks so much for listening. Goodbye. Thanks so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke. My special guest is Michael Dennis, who can be found on Twitter at Michael_Dennis. These podcasts are only possible thanks to the generosity of patrons, who include Samuel. I don't have a surname for you, Samuel, but I'm grateful nonetheless. Edward Salt, John Sheehan, Paul Shields, Trevor Smith, Richard Smith, David Spencer, David Spofford, Adam Stone, Paul Taylor-Greaves, Jason Thompson, Sidney Truitt, John Turner, Gary Wales, Jeff Walker, Alistair Wallace, Gavin Ware, Peter Ware, Rich Wiggins, Barry Platt, Darren Mackay, Joe Llewellyn, Ian Key, Siobhan Galichon, Jason Gorman, Chris Phone, Chris Dunford-Kelk, John Deere and Rob Dawson. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like to join that list of names, although you don't have to be credited if you don't want to, some people prefer to remain anonymous, and I can understand why. You don't want to be seen to be funding this sort of thing. You can go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. Your anonymity will be protected if you so desire it. You can join from as little as £3 a month, and signing up free in advance gets you a 10% discount on top of that. There are all sorts of different tiers, but it's fairly egalitarian. Most things are available from the cheapest tier. However, a monthly commitment is quite a lot to ask, but there is Ko-fi, where you can pass me like I'm a busker on the tube and throw a couple of coffers my way if you decide to that day, or if you like the tune I'm playing, or if you just think I look hungry or full of promise. I think those days are gone. But anyway, kofi.com/Toby Hadoke. But I know it's tricky, times are tight, and you've got better things to spend your money on than anorak-clad jesters, in which case, do you know what costs you nothing? Going to iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and giving these podcasts a 5-star rating and perhaps a line or two of review. That just really helps any other passing punters to perhaps zero in on the person making the noise and checking them out. If you could do that, I would be very, very grateful. All it will cost you is your time, and it will very much help my algorithms, and they really need all the help they can get. And I run a comedy night in Manchester called Excess Malarkey. I've done so since the dawn of time, 1997, during which it's won loads of awards, which is why we keep going strong, charging as little as possible. On a Tuesday night at 8 p.m, some fantastic acts from the live circuit, glued together by me. And I know, obviously, not everybody listening to this will live in Manchester or even the UK. However, it's available worldwide in its internet form, twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey on the first Sunday of every month. And there's an archive up there on that channel of past glories and examples of the sort of thing we get up to. The online show is obviously a little bit different because it's not a live comedy venue, but it's got comics from around the world trying to make you laugh and bring people together and have fun. And it's good. So check out both of those things. Excess Malarkey is on Twitter at Excess Malarkey, as am I at Toby Hadoke, as are these podcasts at Hadoke Podcasts. Please spread the word and enjoy yourself while you're doing so. Weird thing is, I'm recording this on the build-up to Christmas. It's the beginning of December. In fact, it's the 3rd of December as I record this, which is my 26th anniversary as a stand-up comedian. 26 years ago today, I took my first tentative steps onto the Thirsty Scholar stage in Manchester. But that will mean nothing, because that's only relevant to me sitting in this booth, because the patrons, I think you're getting this about a week later. Yeah, about a week later, maybe 2 weeks later, because it's episode 3, isn't it? So a couple of weeks afterwards. The non-patrons, you won't be hearing this till the sun's out. But I suppose that's an illustration of the time difference to anybody that's bothered to listen this far. So there we go. Happy Advent, everyone who isn't in Advent, apart from patrons, but you're a bit further into Advent and probably the novelty's worn off. I pronounced it Advent and Advent there, both in the same sentence. What a skilled linguist I am.